Welcome back. And here is a health informatics data and AI talk, focusing on the evolving world of large language models and healthcare LLMs. We're diving deep into all of this. The potential benefits, the very real risks, and the regulatory roller coaster that surrounds these powerful tools. You shared some fascinating research with me, and I can't wait to unpack it all.
It is a fascinating time to be looking at
Hmm.
this. It's a bit like discovering a powerful new medication. It has the potential to be life-changing, but also carries risks if not properly understood and regulated.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's start by making sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
We hear LLMs everywhere these days. But what exactly are we talking about? Some folks might still be picturing robots performing surgery.
Yeah, that's a common misconception. In reality, we're talking about advanced computer programs trained on massive amounts of data. Think mountains of text and code. This allows them to analyze and generate human-like text in a way that was unthinkable just a few years ago.
So it's like having a computer that can write a medical textbook, summarize the latest research findings, and even draft a patient letter, all in a matter of seconds.
That's the potential, yes. And there are already models specifically designed for healthcare, like MedPal-M, that are showing real promise in tasks like analyzing medical images and providing diagnostic insights.
Okay, that's starting to paint a picture of the possibilities.
Yeah.
But I'm also sensing some caution in your voice. The research you shared wasn't all sunshine and roses, was it?
Right. One of the key challenges with LLMs is their tendency to generate what are called hallucinations, essentially. They can produce information that sounds plausible, but is completely made up.
So they could potentially spit out a fabricated diagnosis or treatment recommendation? That sounds a bit terrifying in a medical context where accuracy is everything.
It is a serious concern, and it underscores the need for rigorous testing and validation. Imagine an LLM advising a doctor and it throws out a made-up diagnosis or suggests a treatment that's actually harmful. The consequences could be devastating.
That really highlights the need for oversight. And speaking of oversight, the research also delved into the regulatory landscape surrounding LLMs in healthcare, which seems to be struggling to keep pace.
It absolutely is. Current regulations for medical devices, for example, weren't designed with these AI-powered systems in mind. It's a bit like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
So we have this incredibly powerful technology with the potential to revolutionize healthcare. But the rules and guidelines are still catching up. What does that mean for patients who are already encountering LLMs in various health apps and platforms?
It's a complex situation. Many of these apps haven't undergone the same rigorous testing and approval processes as traditional medical devices. So patients could be getting advice from an AI that hasn't been thoroughly vetted. And that's where the regulators come in.
It sounds like a bit of a wild west out there, with developers pushing the boundaries of what's possible and regulators trying to catch up and establish some ground rules.
That's a fair assessment. The EU is taking a fairly proactive approach with their new AI Act, which classifies high-risk AI systems, including those used in healthcare. But in the US, the FDA is still grappling with how to categorize these LLM-powered apps and what level of scrutiny they require.
This regulatory uncertainty must be creating challenges for both developers and healthcare providers, right? It's tough to innovate and implement new tools when the rules of the game keep changing.
It absolutely does. On the one hand, developers need clear guidelines to ensure they're building safe and effective applications. On the other hand, healthcare providers need to be confident that the tools they're using have met rigorous standards.
It sounds like we need a balanced approach that fosters innovation while also prioritizing patient safety. What are some of the key solutions being proposed to navigate this complex landscape?
There's a growing consensus that we need a multi-pronged approach. First, developers need to prioritize transparency. We need to understand how these models are trained, what data they're using, and what their limitations are. It can't be a black box scenario, especially when dealing with people's health.
So no more smoke and mirrors. We need to be able to look under the hood and understand how these AI systems are arriving at their conclusions.
Exactly. Developers also need to be incredibly careful about data security and patient privacy. This is sensitive medical information, and it needs to be handled with the utmost care.
That makes sense. And I imagine rigorous testing and validation are crucial as well, right? We need to make sure these LLMs are accurate and reliable in real-world healthcare settings.
Absolutely. Real-world clinical trials are essential to evaluate the safety and efficacy of these systems before they're widely deployed. And that brings us to the role of regulators.
So what can regulators do to keep pace with this rapidly evolving technology?
They have a huge responsibility to adapt existing frameworks or create new ones specifically designed for LLMs. This includes clear guidelines for developers, a streamlined approval process for LLM-based healthcare applications, and ongoing monitoring to ensure these systems are being used safely and effectively.
It sounds like both developers and regulators have a lot of work to do to ensure that this technology is used responsibly and ethically in healthcare. But it's not just about the technical and regulatory aspects, is it? There's also the human element to consider.
Absolutely. Ultimately, it's about patients and their well-being. We need to ensure that LLMs are used in a way that empowers patients, improves their health outcomes, and preserves the trust between patients and healthcare providers.
Well said. And I think that's a perfect segue to our next segment, where we'll delve into the potential impact of LLMs on the doctor-patient relationship.
I'm looking forward to that. It's a crucial aspect of this conversation. Let's kind of shift gears a bit and talk about how these LLMs actually work. It's easy to get caught up in the potential and the risks, but I find that understanding the underlying technology can help us make more informed decisions about its use.
I'm all for that, I have to admit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like magic when these AI systems generate human-like text, but I know there's a lot of complex science behind it.
There is. One of the key concepts is word embedding. Essentially, LLMs translate words into numerical representations, kind of like a secret code that computers can understand.
So it's like taking a word like diagnosis and turning it into a string of numbers that represents its meaning.
Precisely. Each word becomes a vector, which is a set of numbers that captures its meaning and relationships to other words. Words used in simile contexts will have similar vectors, even if they don't share any letters.
That's fascinating. So heart attack and cardiac arrest would have vectors that are closer together than, say, heart attack and headache, right?
Exactly. It's this ability to understand semantic relationships that allows LLMs to do things like summarize medical reports, translate technical jargon into plain language, or even generate personalized health advice.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm also thinking about the potential for errors or misinterpretations. Human language can be so nuanced and context-dependent. How do LLMs handle that?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of some of the challenges we've been discussing. LLMs don't understand language in the same way humans do. They rely on statistical patterns and probabilities, which can sometimes lead to misinterpretations, or, as we talked about earlier, hallucinations.
So even with all this sophisticated technology, there's still a risk of the AI getting things wrong, especially when dealing with the complexities of human health. That seems like a good reason to be cautious.
It is, and it highlights the need for human oversight, critical evaluation of LLM output, and continuous refinement of these systems as we learn more about their strengths and weaknesses.
We touched on the regulatory challenges earlier, but I'm curious to delve deeper into the ethical considerations surrounding LLMs in healthcare. Seems like there's a lot to unpack there.
There is. One of the most pressing issues is data privacy. These LLMs are trained on massive data sets, and it's crucial to ensure that patient data is handled responsibly and ethically.
So we need to be thinking about things like informed consent, data security, and who has access to this information.
Absolutely. Patients need to be aware of how their data is being used, and they need to have control over how it's shared. There's also the risk of data breaches, which could have serious consequences for patients.
That's a real concern, especially given the increasing frequency of cyber attacks targeting healthcare organizations. What about the potential for LLMs to exacerbate existing health disparities? We talked about this briefly earlier, but I'd like to explore it further.
It's a crucial point. If these LLMs are trained on data that primarily reflects certain demographics or socioeconomic groups, they could perpetuate existing biases and inequalities in healthcare.
So we need to ensure that the data sets used to train these models are diverse and representative of the populations they're intended to serve.
Exactly. Otherwise, we risk creating AI systems that benefit some groups at the expense of others. And that would be a step backward, not forward.
It seems like there's a lot of responsibility on developers to build these systems in a way that's ethical and equitable. But what about the role of healthcare providers? How can they use LLMs responsibly and ensure that they're benefiting their patients?
That's a great question. It's crucial for healthcare providers to understand both the capabilities and the limitations of LLMs. They need to be critical consumers of the information these systems provide and never blindly accept their recommendations without careful consideration.
So it's about using LLMs as tools to support their decision-making, not to replace their own expertise and judgment.
Precisely. Healthcare providers need to be trained to use these tools effectively and ethically, and they need to maintain open communication with their patients about how AI is being used in their care.
Transparency seems to be a key theme here, both in terms of how these systems are developed and how they're used in clinical practice.
It is. We need to move away from the black box mentality and towards a more open and accountable approach to AI in healthcare.
That makes sense. Now, I know this technology is still evolving rapidly, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the future of LLMs in healthcare. What are some of the most promising applications you see on the horizon?
One area that holds immense potential is personalized medicine. LLMs could analyze a patient's individual characteristics, medical history, genetic profile, and lifestyle factors to help tailor treatment plans that are more likely to be effective and have fewer side effects.
So it's about moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to treatment and towards a more individualized and data-driven model. That sounds incredibly promising, especially for patients with complex or rare conditions.
Exactly. And LLMs could also play a crucial role in drug discovery and development. They could analyze vast amounts of scientific literature, clinical trial data, and molecular information to identify potential drug targets and predict the efficacy and safety of new compounds.
It's like speeding up the research process by using AI to sift through mountains of data and identify promising leads. That could have a huge impact on bringing new treatments to patients faster.
It absolutely could. Another area where LLMs could make a significant difference is in mental health care. Imagine AI-powered chatbots that provide 24/7 support and guidance to people struggling with anxiety, depression, or other mental health challenges.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, it could be a game changer in terms of increasing access to mental health care, especially for people in rural areas or those who face barriers to traditional therapy.
Exactly. And LLMs could also be used to personalize mental health treatments, taking into account an individual's specific symptoms, preferences, and needs.
These are just a few examples, of course. I imagine as the technology continues to evolve, we'll see even more innovative applications emerging in healthcare and beyond.
You're absolutely right. The potential is vast, but we need to proceed thoughtfully and responsibly, ensuring that these powerful tools are used ethically and for the benefit of all.
This discussion has been incredibly insightful. I'm starting to see how LLMs could truly revolutionize healthcare, but I'm also aware of the potential pitfalls and the need for careful oversight. It seems like we're at a critical juncture where we need to make some important decisions about how to shape the future of this technology.
I agree. We're at a crossroads, and the choices we make now will have far-reaching consequences. It's crucial that we have these conversations, engage with the ethical challenges, and work together to ensure that LLMs are used in a way that benefits all of humanity.
Well said. Now, the research you shared also delved into the technical foundations of LLMs, which I think is essential for understanding both their potential and their limitations. Can we dive into some of those technical details? I'm curious to learn more about how these systems actually process and understand language.
Absolutely. Let's start by discussing the two main phases in the development of LLMs, pre-training and fine-tuning. Pre-training is like giving the LLM a crash course in human language.
So we're talking about feeding it massive amounts of text data, like books, articles, websites, even social media posts.
Exactly. It's like building a vast digital library for the LLM to devour. Through this process, it learns the statistical relationships between words, phrases, and concepts. It's essentially learning the rules of grammar and how to construct meaningful sentences.
And that's how it becomes capable of generating human-like text.
Precisely. But that's just the first step. The real magic happens in the fine-tuning phase, where we specialize the LLM for a specific task.
So that's where we take this language whiz and turn it into a medical expert.
You could say that. If we want to use an LLM for medical diagnosis, for example, we would fine-tune it on a data set of medical records, research papers, and clinical guidelines. It's like giving the LLM a specialized medical education.
I see. So it's not just about having access to a lot of information. It's about knowing how to apply that information in a specific domain.
Yeah.
Like healthcare.
Exactly. And this fine-tuning process is crucial for improving the LLM's accuracy and reliability in performing specific tasks.
But even with fine-tuning, there's still the potential for errors, right? We talked about hallucinations earlier and how LLMs can sometimes generate fabricated information.
That's right. And that's why it's crucial to understand another important concept, the probabilistic nature of LLMs.
Okay, you've lost me a bit there. What do you mean by probabilistic?
Well, LLMs don't think in absolutes. They work with probabilities, assigning a likelihood to different words and phrases based on their training data.
So it's like the LLM is making educated guesses about what words are most likely to come next in a sentence, based on the patterns it's learned.
Exactly. And while it's usually very good at making those guesses, there's always a chance it will choose a word or phrase that sounds plausible, but is factually incorrect or out of context.
And that's where the hallucinations come in. It's like the LLM is telling a convincing story, but it might not be based in reality.
Precisely. And this highlights the importance of human oversight. We can't simply trust the LLM's output blindly. We need to critically evaluate it and consider the context.
That makes a lot of sense. So what are some strategies for improving the performance of LLMs and reducing those hallucinations?
Researchers are exploring various approaches. One promising method is called retrieval augmented generation, essentially. It involves connecting the LLM to a database of verified information.
So it's like giving the LLM access to a trusted medical textbook or a database of peer-reviewed research.
Exactly. This helps to ground the LLM's responses in facts and reduces the likelihood of it going off on a fictional tangent.
That sounds like a smart approach.
Yeah.
What are some other methods being explored?
Another strategy is to combine multiple LLMs, each specialized in a different aspect of the task. Think of it like assembling a team of AI specialists.
I like that analogy. So you might have one LLM focused on analyzing medical images, another on summarizing patient records, and a third on generating treatment recommendations.
Exactly. By combining their expertise, you can create a more robust and reliable system. It's like having a multidisciplinary team of doctors working together.
It sounds like the field of AI is advancing rapidly, and there's a lot of exciting research happening around LLMs. But I'm also curious about the practical implications. How are these advances being translated into real-world healthcare applications?
That's where things get really interesting. We're already seeing LLMs being used in a variety of healthcare settings, from hospitals and clinics to research labs and pharmaceutical companies.
Can you give us some specific examples?
One example is the use of LLMs to improve the efficiency and accuracy of medical coding and billing. These tasks can be incredibly time-consuming and prone to errors. But LLMs can automate much of the process, freeing up healthcare professionals to focus on patient care.
So it's about streamlining administrative tasks and reducing the burden on healthcare workers.
Exactly. Another promising application is in the development of virtual assistants for patients. Imagine an AI-powered chatbot that can answer questions about medications, schedule appointments, or provide personalized health advice. This could significantly improve patient engagement and access to care.
It sounds like LLMs could revolutionize the patient experience, making healthcare more accessible and user-friendly.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And it's not just about convenience. LLMs can also be used to analyze patient data and identify potential risks or early warning signs of disease. This could lead to earlier interventions and better health outcomes.
It's like having a 247 health monitor that can detect subtle patterns and alert patients or their doctors to potential problems before they become serious.
Precisely. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. As LLMs continue to evolve, we can expect to see even more innovative applications emerge in areas like personalized medicine, drug discovery, and public health.
It's been fascinating to explore this topic with you. I feel like we've really gotten a good grasp of the potential of LLMs, but also the really important considerations around their use.
Yes. It's crucial to approach this technology thoughtfully and ethically and ensure that its development and deployment prioritize patient safety and well-being.
Well said. Well, that wraps up another deep dive. Thank you for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure. Until next time.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of cutting-edge technology.